Hi everyone, welcome to this week's video. I still don't know what the fuck I'm calling this channel. um, I've got a few names in mind, but I'm still figuring it out. But this week's topic, I'm going to go ahead and talk about um, what gaining is very simply to others and then also to society, cover a little bit about gainer history, and then what it means to be a gainer, and briefly overview some of the difficulties I have dealing with like medical providers and stuff, and then also how gaining ties into my current sexuality and how I've talked to other people and it ties into theirs. And I'm not going to name names or anything specific. I'm just going to give overall um, sort of like a general overview of what I have found out within the community. So, and then why being a gainer is important and why you shouldn't stop being who you are. So we'll go over that at the end. So to start, what gaining is very simply. So gaining pretty much is to me, it's basically at its core, it's helping somebody or being the person putting on weight. So it can be if you're an encourager, it's helping a gainer put on weight. If you're a gainer, it's putting weight on yourself. And you can be a gainer and encourager. I'm a gainer and encourager. You can be just an encourager. You can be just a gainer. You can be a maintainer and kind of a gainer. You can be fat curious, which means that you're just interested in the whole phenomena. It's very interesting, but not one size label fits all, no pun intended. But basically, that is what gaining is at its core. So there is gaining both in the straight and gay community. And when I say that, that's all encompassing. So that's bi, transgender, QIA, all of those facets of sexual orientation are it's not mutually exclusive. So basically, except the terms gainer and encourager are more specific to the gay community. It's just the act themselves can be all along the spectrum. Um, but what gaining and encouraging is, there are terms where, like I said, gainer is pretty much the person getting fat, and encourager is the person that's encouraging that person to get fat. In the straight community, it's feeder and feedee. So, feedee is the person getting fat, and feeder is, well, the feeder. And then there's also some other offshoot words like fetus, which just refers to the whole entire like straight community, as a whole. It's like the fetus community. And then for gainers, I've heard a lot of different things, mostly due to the whole grommer phenomena. I've heard grommerite. I've heard all different terms. I know for folks that aren't in the community, I've heard the term civilian, which is for somebody that's not a gainer or encourager. So that's an interesting one. So yeah, that's pretty much some terms that are found within the community. Um, and so from that, I want to go a little bit into the history of gaining. Now, before we go any further, I don't know a lot about the straight community and the the culture that's on Fantasy Feeder. I don't really know much about the history of the standard straight gaining community. I'm a gay male, and I primarily have just been in the gay gainer community. That being said, I've had straight friends that are feeders and feedees, so I've just never discussed these topics with them. But we have discussed, of course, the act of getting fat, right? Because that's a thing that bonded us together. So basically, gaining, in my opinion, all pretty much started back. I mean, I think in some facets it's always been around in a little bit of a way. When you look at like old, I don't know, artwork from the 1500s, or you hear stories about the Roman Empire where, people would eat tons of food and then they would go to these vomitoriums and they would throw it all up and then they would eat again. Like, there might have been something going on there. I'm sure of it. But of course, that stuff's not documented, right? Because who would, that was so taboo back then, to even talk about that kind of stuff. But I think it's been around in some way, shape, or form for years. So, in terms of mainstream, I think probably the big men's clubs of the 1920s and 1910s were probably somewhere where that was lying dormant, but maybe not ever talked about. There's never been any documented, incidents of it, but it has been, I'm sure it was alluded to somewhere in a club or something. But I could be totally off base about that. That's a Mark theory. But officially, gaining as a thing started in 1976 in San Francisco with a club called Girth and Mirth. It's very interesting to read about this. If you get a chance and you are on Grommer, check out the Gainer History Project, especially if you're in the community. It's fascinating to get the history about who you are and what your community represents. I loved reading through it. It was very fascinating and kind of made me feel like a kinship to a culture. So it's very, very cool. Um, but the first newsletter actually was a newsletter called Dragon Gate, and that was founded in 1982. And it wasn't exclusively a Gainer and Encourager magazine, but it was a magazine that people would have distributed to them or they could pick up on underground circuits. And it would allude to things like the comic with Judge Dredd, for example, that you guys may have seen, where there's like people walking around with their bellies in shopping carts. So things like that. It was interesting. I was taking a look through some of the older magazines somewhere, and it's pretty cool. And then in 1985, the terms Gainer and Encourager are actually created. They're officially coined to differentiate gay feeder and feedies from straight feeder and feedies. And that was a thing then. And so that's when our group's designation was officially, engraved in history. And then from 1985 to about, I want to say maybe about 2002, there were lots of groups that were getting together. There was a lot of groups like on early AOL and early just internet, like GainerWeb was one of them. And then there were meetings around the world, like in UK, in New York City, and LA. So all these people that were getting together and were like connecting on Gaining and Encouraging. And it was a very exciting time, as it was for a lot of communities that were, you know, like, different or small or underground. It was a really cool time for them to have some recognition. And in 1986, GainerWeb was created. It was the very first website, or one of the very first actual websites, to feature profiles, like dating profiles and, pictures. And I actually discovered Gaining in 2004. I discovered GainerWeb, and I actually discovered it one night while I was looking for pornography online. We all have needs, okay? No judgment. And I was like, this is really weird. And then I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like, I need to be part of this. So, it was really an adjustment. And I'm glad that I did it. I honestly am so happy that I did what I did. And then Belly Builders came in around that time too, a really great website. And that website's actually still manned. Like, it's really cool. Like, I was on there like a month ago, and there's still content and there's still people talking, and it's been around like almost 20 years now. Like, that's pretty awesome. I don't think GainerWeb is around anymore, but Belly Builders is. And then there was Fat Nats, which was another website. And then further on down the line, there was Beefy Frat, which was kind of like pre-Grommer. It was really interesting. And then I remember I was part of GainerWeb, and then me and my friends started to get together. We were talking. There was all these other sites called like ChubSpot, and I remember, and a few other ones. And we all kind of got together, and we saw that there was a site that was like a unique like site out of India or Malaysia or something like that. It was like something somebody put together, but it was very, very, very pre-Grommer. And there was IRC chat, which for you people that, are, very young and make me feel like I'm extremely old, being 35 years old, that in IRC chat was a chat room that was just a chat room. It was just a message board chat room, and you would just go in and you would just talk, and that would be it. Like, there would be no pictures, there would be no messaging, like you couldn't send gifs or anything like that. It was just talk. And a lot of the times when you went in, you had to use something called Usenet, which was like a they used like their own like terminology. Like, you'd have to like you could use at symbols or pound symbols to do certain things within there. But yeah, it was called Internet Relay Chat. Really cool and interesting. I kind of wish it was still up because it was pretty interesting. I met a lot of cool friends on there. I actually met a friend of mine who lives near me on there almost like 15 years ago, and we still talk like pretty regularly. So it just goes to show that connections in a community can just last forever. Um, and then in 2011, Grommer hit, and that has been the biggest gaining website. It has been the most flexible website. People join it, people post pictures. It's very visual, it's very clean, it's very efficient. I personally really like Grommer. I know a lot of people don't. Some of the content on there, like people, and this just isn't my thing, but, like people, constantly begging for money. Like, it's not my thing, but if that's what you guys, or that's what people want to do, more power to them. That's just not my thing. Um, and then, a few other things like, just frustrating things I see on Grommer occasionally. And if you are a Grommer regular, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We all get a little frustrated from time to time. But overall, the site is pretty solid with a lot of very nice people. And for me, it's like my second Facebook. Like, I met so many people off Grommer, and I'm friends with so many of them, and I'm so grateful for having them in my life. Like, because some of them helped me out through some pretty difficult times. So, yeah, absolutely so happy to have my friends on there. And like I said, some of those extended from way far back, like from the Belly Builder days. So, yeah, it's very cool. So, and that pretty much brings us to current. I know that there was some publicity in the news a few years back about gaining because it was a new thing, and there was a kind of a scare media wise about it. And it is scary, right? Like, you're dealing with something that seems absolutely foreign to everybody. Like, everybody in this world like seems to hate fat anymore. It's like awful. Like I went online, and there was this like my 600-pound life hate group where they just were like ragging on fat people, and I was like, this is crazy. Like, I don't know why somebody would spend so much effort to hate on somebody. And I think the thing that pisses me off the most about it is they have this self-righteous attitude, right? So Bill Mayer recently released a video on his or YouTube. There was a video about him like ripping on fat people and saying how it has to come back in order to like save people. Like, that is not how you get somebody that has, body image issues related to abuse or whatever to get healthier. Like, that's not. And every doctor that's worth their salt that I've talked to doesn't ever agree with that either. Like, every doctor that I've talked to has always been pretty, like, okay with it. They just want you to be healthy. I mean, they'll tell you that gaining weight isn't healthy, but they're never demonizing it. And so it's just amazing to me. Like, there are so many people out there that, you know, want to, like, ruin everything for everybody else. But that's the world we live in. So there you have it. So what gaining means to various facets of the community. So I think it's divided into two things that aren't mutually exclusive and that are intermixed. So the first thing is sexuality. And I think for pretty much everybody that's gay or bi or transgender or straight in some way, shape, or form, it's linked to this. But not always. Like, some people are asexual, and that's totally cool. Most of the people I know, they usually have some sexual drive from it, right? So and it usually accompanies some other things. So, like, I've seen gaining really accompany, like, BDSM type stuff, where, the feeder is the dom and the feedee is the sub, or the encourager is the dom and the gainer is the sub. Although that's not always the same thing, like, all the time. I met people that are in the reverse thing. I met people that are, like, power feedies, which are, like, they enjoy having somebody feed them and they enjoy ordering them around. Like, I've enjoyed it. I've seen it the other way, where the gainer guy wants to be kind of, super fat, and then the feeder is the more, gruff one that wants to just make him fat. So I mean, it's just really different and varies per person. I have seen a lot of overlap, though, and it's not that all of gainers are this, or not all of this group as gainers, but I have seen a lot of overlap in the furry community. And I think it's fascinating. Like, I myself am not a furry. I have a lot of friends that are furries. My partner is a furry. And I think it's really great. Like, I think anything that you can have that helps you express, number one, your sexuality, but number two, helps you express yourself as an art form. Like, how people go online through, like, DeviantArt or Tumblr or Twitter, and they'll draw, like, pictures. And I mean, some of these pictures are pretty, like, damn awesome. Like, I am not an artist by, like, no means, and people, like, draw, and I'm just like, holy shit. Like, that's, like, the coolest fucking artwork I've ever seen. But it's pretty neat. And then there's identity. So that's the other piece of it too. There's also some vor stuff that goes in with sexuality. I've seen that too, which kind of makes sense because it's all, like, big belly and digestion kind of stuff. And then there's a few other things that are interlaced within the community. And then there's just gainers, like, myself. So, I mean, it's just a wide variety. It covers all the spectrums of the human rainbow. And so I love to see that. So identity. So identity is me, essentially. I am sexually driven by gaining, by, like, every way, shape, and form. But for me, losing weight is, like, the tantamount to me, and I hate to say it this way, but it's the truth. It's a tantamount to me, like, losing down there, if you know what I mean? Like, my area. It's, I would not be happy at all. In fact, about maybe a year or two ago, I was on this weight loss thing. I have stage 3 lymphedema, not lymphoma, lymphedema, and basically that's when your legs swell up, and it sucks because it gets painful and irritated, and it's ugly. People look at you like you're dying, and I'm not. But basically, I went ahead and saw that happening, and I call her Esther. If you've ever seen Wanda Sykes, you know what I'm referring to. And I started losing a bunch of weight. Like I went from like 430 or 440 to about like 410, 405, somewhere around there. And I did it over the course of like 3 to 4 months. And when that was happening and I saw the changes that were occurring, I was really depressed. Like, and it got to a point where I became kind of suicidally depressed. But I wasn't going to do anything because I have a loving family and I have a fantastic partner. So I went ahead and got help for it. And I was like, well, maybe there was something wrong with me. So I went to a therapist, and the therapist did an evaluation of me and looked at my history, looked at all of my background, looked at my mental health history, any medications I was on. I mean, there was a very thorough assessment, very thorough psychiatric evaluation, like extremely thorough. I mean, I was even evaluated by a psychiatrist because I wanted to make sure, because I'm that kind of person. And they came back negative with everything. And they're like, this is just you. This is just part of your identity. This is part of who you are. And at that point, I started thinking in a way like maybe, I'm sure there's things like body dysmorphia that occurs for some people, but I didn't meet the requirements for this. I met no requirements for having a body dysmorphia disorder. And it was because my background wasn't really driven from abuse or anything like that, which is usually what drives body dysmorphic disorder. My background was just an identity thing. Like this person just needs to be in a bigger body, and it would be the same like if he was a male and, he felt like he should be like a female and he was still in a man's body and he wasn't able to be in the body that his brain was telling him to be. It was kind of along the same lines. And the more that I started reaching out to people and talking to people about this, I actually found like this was a thing within the community. Like there are people that actually do feel the same way that I do. And I was actually really amazed by that. In fact, I talked to somebody recently and they actually coined the term as trans fat, which kind of is like Crisco, but it's kind of, not. Because you need Crisco to get fat. Anyway, just really fascinating. And so I guess with all that to be said, that's usually my viewpoint on all this. Also, all the topics that I just talked about, they also apply to muscle gaining too. That has been also a thing where, it's not just fat gaining, but it's muscle gaining too. It all has like kind of similar connotations with it. It's all about size driven type identities and sexualities. So I think either with sexuality or identity, it all causes difficulty with life in a way for people. And you're going to have people like doctors, and you're going to have people that are bosses, you're going to have people that are parents, you're going to have people that are siblings, you're going to have people that are, I don't know, coworkers, you're going to have people that are, your own family that are going to tell you have to lose weight or else you're out of my life or whatever like that. The thing is, and I know this is so hard to say, especially for me because most of my family was accepting and most of my I haven't really had that much of an issue with doctors or bosses or anything like that. So I am kind of a little bit, I guess, lucky in that regard. But on the other hand, I'm a firm believer that you have to be you. You can't satisfy the will of others, even if that means changing your situation to allow you to be you, no matter how hard that is, needs to happen. Because for me, I was in an abusive relationship back in 2006, and I discovered I was a gainer then. And if I would still be in that relationship, I would have been so unhappy. But I spent time and a lot of money and a lot of effort to get myself out of that position. And it was a very hard transition. It was not easy. But when I did that, my mental health improved greatly. So that just what has worked. That's my advice. That's worked for me. Everybody is different, and I get that. But largely, I believe that you should never stop being who you are, because at the end, if you're not who you are, they win. The people that are oppressing fat people, gay people, bi people, others part of the LGBTQIA spectrum are going to win if you don't stand up and say, fuck you, this is who I am. Plain and simple. They will win and you will have lost. And I know that's hard to hear, and I know it's difficult, and I know everybody isn't in the best situation to address that. Um, but for me to achieve my own happiness, I have to live that way, and it's not fun. So, again, that's pretty much my video this week's go around. I wanted to just share my thoughts and, a history of the community. Again, apologize for some of the sound. I'm next to a window with a parking lot, so it's kind of frustrating. So I wanted to just take some time and give you guys some future video topics that I'm thinking of doing. So I'm thinking of doing something related to Star Trek. As you can see, I'm a Star Trek fan. And then I'm also thinking of doing some stuff related to gaming, such as like Final Fantasy and whatnot. Because I love this idea that I'm doing, but also I want it to be more about my life too than just gaming. But I'm still going to put videos on here and post them on Grommer, and also looking into updating my Twitter with that information. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed. If you like my content, please subscribe. I put out videos every Wednesday, approximately. Hopefully, if I remember, we'll see what happens. And yeah, leave your comments in the comments below and let me know your thoughts. I love to hear them. All right. See you next week. Bye.